This is the When Work Isn't Work podcast. This podcast exists to help people reignite the love of what they do in a post-pandemic world. The pandemic gave us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reflect on what is truly important to us in work and in life. I'm your host, Sinead Connolly, co-founder and director of Lotus People, an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency. We hope you enjoy today's chat. My guest on today's podcast is the incredible Alex Hattingh, Chief People Officer of Employment Hero. Alex has been at the helm of Employment Hero, working with the executive team from a small startup to take the business through to unicorn status and through a global expansion. Alex leads with integrity, with a genuine care for her people, and is a passionate advocate for remote work and embracing the future of work. An important and relevant conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Alex, welcome. Welcome to When Work Isn't Work.
Great to be here, and so good to know that you've just done a month of remote work from Bali.
I know. It's honestly, I feel so grateful. And this is going straight into something that I would love to speak to you more about, because I know you're such an advocate for this, but I am so grateful for the future of work. I am so grateful for remote working. I'm so grateful for how things have shifted and changed, and the kind of mass acceleration that we've done in terms of how we work purely because of the circumstances that we found ourselves in over the last few years. And I know you're super passionate about that, and it's something that you I definitely want to pick your brains on. So yeah, it's good to be back. I'm not prepared for the cold. I'm not prepared for how chilly it is. But look, we go back years, you and I. You have been a very, very early supporter of Lotus, which I am eternally grateful for. And I have watched Employment Hero sort of go through this absolute rapid growth over the last few years. And I think I was thinking about it earlier, maybe only a few dozen people in the business when you started, when we started working together. And now you're a unicorn. You've had this huge success. And I know for a fact that a lot of that success has come down to how you operate, the integrity you have around people leadership, and the energy that you put into caring for your people. So I'm super excited to go through all of this and share your journey with people, because you've most certainly inspired me in a massive way over the years. So to kick us off, I would love if you could give us a brief overview of your role as it sits at the moment, current state of career, state of play in this moment.
So as you mentioned, Employment Hero, we've gone on this absolutely incredible journey. And when I started, not too many people and not too many processes, and we have grown to 550 globally, and remote work has really helped us do that. Would you believe before COVID, we were just hiring in Sydney, and we found that when we went remote first, we could hire all over Australia, and it opened up our talent pool enormously. So now I'm dealing with scaling at growth and how do we add to our culture. I don't believe you can maintain culture when you're growing this quickly. And yes, we need to put more processes in and make sure we're hiring people that are agile and that are going to succeed, so that we're going to set them up to succeed from the get-go. And the recruitment is just so vital for getting that right person. So my role today is Chief People Officer, and I oversee all the people and culture functions. However, as I always say, the head of people and culture doesn't own it. We're more the custodian, and all of leadership and everyone in management really needs to own culture.
I love that. And I love the phrase, the custodian. It's so apt. And I think where I have seen businesses fail is probably the wrong word, but struggle is where there is that really clear delineation between HR, P&C, and the rest of the business. And I don't think that breeds success in terms of culture. I think culture needs to be fed through from every team, every individual, exactly as you've described. So yeah, it's amazing. I definitely, as I said before, I've been so inspired by the journey that you've been on and how you've brought the business through to, with your amazing leadership team, to where it's at today. And naturally, in all these iterations, there's so much excitement, but there's no next phase without a new set of challenges. I have definitely experienced that myself with Lotus. All the iterations just mean that we have completely different jobs every 6 months, I think.
Absolutely.
And can you talk through then, you're in the role where, from where I sit, it really seems like you do love what you do. It kind of emanates from you. And I love the passion that you have for what you do. Can you talk me through your journey, your sort of story, I guess, that got you to this point in your career?
Yeah, I at school, I always knew I wanted to either be in HR or a psychologist. I think I dropped my psychology classes pretty early on in uni. I did an economics degree because I did always want a degree that was going to give me some kind of business acumen. I've been incredibly fortunate in my career. Outside of uni, after I graduated, I landed at the Commonwealth Bank, and I was really disappointed because what we'd been taught at university was not what HR was. It was highly transactional. I'd always wanted to move to New York City, so when I turned 25, I made that decision. And I also always wanted to study at Cornell University. We looked at a lot of their thought leaders during my undergrad degree in economics at Sydney Uni. So I trekked over to New York without a visa. It was just after 9/11. So it took me about 6 months to find a job, during which I volunteered for various expat organizations over there. And I was really fortunate to land at monster.com in kind of its heyday, which is also part of TMP, which a lot of Australians may have heard of. I was there for 6+ years, over about 6 roles. And I then had the opportunity to divest TMP from Monster, which usually you do a merger or you might do an acquisition. It's very unusual to divest a business. So that was super exciting to me. 1,000 employees, 22 offices across America, essentially. And at the time, TMP was going to downsize after a couple of years of heading up people and culture for them. So I've always been super honest with my managers, and I've told them if I've capped out of my career, and I let them know that my successor was ready to go and I was going to look for a job. In the 2 years prior, I had done my master's degree at Cornell part-time in New York City with summers in Ithaca at their campus. I was aspiring to work for Yahoo or Google, and at the time I was fortunate enough to interview with both of them. I took the job at Yahoo. At the time, Yahoo was definitely the bigger brand. I spent a couple of years there, and then at my 10-year mark of living in New York, the same recruiter from Google a couple of years ago reached out to me for a role in Singapore with the aim to get me back to Australia. And that was always the plan for me, was to move back to Australia. New York was meant to be 2 years. It turned into 10. So Google, I moved to Singapore and I oversaw Southeast Asia sales as the head of HR there. I then moved back to Australia with Google, which was fantastic. At the time, Google took a bit of a shift in terms of how decisions were made. It became very Mountain View centric, which is understandable. As a company, you do need to have a headquarters. So if you were happy to be an executor and just kind of a bit of a robot, staying in non-Mountain View was fine. Again, I had a really honest conversation with my manager at the time and just said, look, this role should be based in Singapore, firstly and foremost. And secondly, I want to be part of a company where I can make decisions, so headquartered in Australia. They kindly offered to move me to Mountain View. However, I was home and really happy. And so then I had a couple of stints in corporates, and then I moved back to startup world.
Amazing. And I imagine that, I mean, first of all, it's incredible. All of the travel, the opportunities, the different huge brands that at the time, I mean, look at the tech world that we know now and how much opportunity there is in startup land in the tech space. And at the time, obviously, it just wasn't, they weren't the predominant industries that people were working in. What was it like working in out of curiosity, Google and Yahoo at that time as you're sort of building, I guess, Web 2 essentially?
Just incredible. The journey, the ride. And one of the things I really noticed about both Yahoo and Google was that anyone that worked there, you know, at Yahoo, we used to say we'd bleed purple. At Google, we used to talk about the fact that we're a movement. So everyone was just so passionate about the end user and the mission of the company. And that was really intriguing to me as to what a difference it made to having a seat at the table when everyone is kind of singing to the same tune.
Absolutely. And I see that from a recruiter's perspective when we work with so many businesses across all industries. I see so much how the tech space can articulate that, and they can articulate their mission and their purpose. And usually and often it's disrupting an industry that is more traditional. And so they need to have a strong purpose as to why they're disrupting that space. And that is something that brings people on the journey. It brings people on board. It heightens engagement. So I can totally see how that would appeal. When you mention, I guess, your transition into HR, you were obviously studying psych, and there's a huge crossover naturally. And you went to Commonwealth, and it wasn't necessarily the HR that you had learned or that you'd hoped it would be. Did you find when you worked in tech that that's when it became the HR that you had hoped or that you had studied? At what point did you have that moment? Yeah.
It was definitely the first few weeks of working at monster.com, and also just the American approach to work. They cared very much about their people. They also let people sink or swim. So promotions happened internally, and people really thrived in those environments. I think in Australia, back when I was 25, companies are very cautious to promote someone until they're fully ready. I think a lot of companies have learned now that's not the way to go, especially with the Great Resignation and career development being at the top of people's asks and wants in their jobs.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And it's great how much that's shifted over here. And you're right, there's a massive difference. We see it in American candidates, within American companies even that we recruit for. There's culturally quite a different approach. And sometimes that can be incredible and exactly what's needed. And sometimes it doesn't work, but that's amazing. And with regards to, I guess, the experience that you had in Commonwealth, and thinking about listeners and thinking about people who post-pandemic are reassessing what's important to them and really thinking about kind of being working in roles and being in businesses that align with their values. If you found yourself in a situation again, or you had someone come to you saying, look, I'm in a role that isn't what I thought it was, like, what advice would you share around actually how long should you stick it out for? How long should you stay in that role? At what point should you make a step to try and figure out where the next thing was? It was great you made that leap, and how could others do the same thing?
Yeah, so when I left Google, I actually had a not great experience where HR wasn't at the table, and I stuck it out for a year. It wasn't a nice environment, and they weren't ahead in terms of technology, and they weren't speaking the speak and treating their people properly. But for some reason, I thought I need to stick this out for 12 months because it's going to look terrible on my resume. And you learn from your mistakes. So when I look back on it today, I learned a ton about what, the wrong way to do things. However, I should have left within the first month. You can always explain it on your resume, and type it out on your resume if you've got a 1-month stint somewhere, and just write the reason why you left. If you live to your values, then you will do it. And it burns you out. We spend so much time at work. If you land somewhere where you're not happy, just make that decision while you've still got your toe in the marketplace, and even have an open conversation with your current manager or company to say, look, this is not what I thought it was, and I'm going to start looking for a new job. So why don't you start looking for my backfill?
I totally agree with you. And again, from a recruiter's perspective, we see it a lot. We see people who stay in the roles and kind of stick with it for a year or so, or we see people who take action immediately. And I think every organization can understand why you would move on from a business that perhaps missold the role, or there was a cultural misalignment, or there's something initially, quickly. And we have those conversations all the time with candidates. And I think it's totally reasonable and very brave. And I think the opportunity cost of staying somewhere for that long, and how that can impact your mental health, or how it can impact your career, and it obviously seeps into the rest of your life as well. That's good to know. And it's definitely, I think a relevant thing for anyone who's not enjoying their role. In thinking about your role now, you are surrounded by the most incredible team. My goodness, they are so effective, so efficient, so divine. And you are, as you said, leading through change and through hyper growth. What is it that keeps you so engaged? What is it that you kind of makes you love what you're doing day to day at the moment, despite lack of time?
Yeah. So, I mean, a few things. When I had that bad experience, I took a step back and kind of tried to assess why it was such a bad experience. And it went back to a couple of things. And that was I needed to work for a company that had a real purpose, that was purpose driven. It wasn't just making widgets or charging people extra money to on their credit cards, etc. So a company with real purpose where people live by that purpose. And what drives me is that Employment Hero is absolutely making employment easier and more valuable for everyone. And also a values-driven company. So we reinforce our values all the time at Employment Hero, which excites me. And then having and being surrounded by incredible people. As you said, I've been on a great journey, but I couldn't have done that without the smartest, most amazing ELT team that I've ever worked with. And Ben Thompson, as an entrepreneur, our founder, pushes us beyond our comfort zone on a weekly basis as it pertains to being bold and ambitious and innovative and making sure we're doing the best for our people and for our culture. And also implementing a couple of really transformative roles over the past few years. A chief revenue officer, so bringing marketing and sales under the one ELT team member. Introducing a CXO, so making sure the customer is at the ELT table. And then most recently, a chief of staff for Ben Thompson. And that role has been transformative in holding us as an ELT accountable when we're moving so quickly. So there, yes, that's some more recent roles that I knew from the US and are starting to come into Australia.
Brilliant. And I'm seeing more and more of those types of roles as well, which definitely have an American kind of leaning in terms of not being very common over here. And you're right, it is all about the people. I think any business, any success, any individual's career, it's about the people you surround yourself with. And I think that really does translate to any level, whether you are entry level, whether you are executive level, having those people around you can absolutely propel your career and also make it enjoyable. I love coming to work. I came into work today for the first time since Bali, and it was just the noise, the energy, the hugs, the kind of camaraderie. It's just been so lovely to catch up with people. And I'm such a firm believer in work needing to be fun and needing to be light, because it is my ethos and everything about why I set up Lotus is because I know that I've always had a strong work ethic and that I care so much about working hard, but it's always been working hard within an environment. I've wanted to create an environment and a culture where people get to feel like they are rewarded, they are recognized, they are valued, and they get to have a lot of fun and be authentic and be themselves. And I think if you can balance those two things really well, I know they're my drivers. And I think if you can balance those two things well, you get quality, you get output, you get productivity. But at the same time, you get to enjoy going to work every day and you get to enjoy having the balance, I guess.
Absolutely. And if you take a step back to Ben's journey, he started his own company because he hated his job in corporate world, and he wanted to have fun at work. He wanted to want to go to work. And I remember when we were talking about me filling this role, I said to Ben, look, having fun is really important to me. And he's like, oh, that's my ethos as well. It's work hard, play hard, celebrate, reward. And so, yeah, you just can't not have fun at work.
No, completely. And he's an amazing founder. How he responded to COVID and the pandemic and everything that happened, I will never forget. And I've been so inspired by his immediate and all of your immediate kind of jump to how can we add value? How can we support? How can we, I think there was a number of newsletters and webinars and just so much information around there was so much information at the time from the government, from the WHO, from just so many different sources. And it was kind of like you guys decided to aggregate it all, put it all together and communicate it in a very digestible way. And I think when you come to the table in times of struggle as a business and lean into your values and work in line with your values, it does stand in people's minds and people do remember it. And that's definitely something that I have had front of mind with the business. It was so impressive. And obviously as a founder, a lot of that will come from him as well. So he's impressive. This podcast is sponsored by Lotus People Recruitment. We are an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency with a genuine human-first and innovative approach. Lotus People are disrupting the recruitment industry by placing quality and service at the heart of all we do. Recruiting roles across HR, talent, business support, and much more. Head to our website today for more information if you are a job seeker or an employer hiring staff. We're at lotuspeople.com.au. And with regards to, thinking about work-life balance and thinking about, I know I just touched on it there, but it's not balance. I hate that word. It's not work-life balance. It's the blend. It's the two things coming together. But with regards to the work-life blend, how do you manage that? I honestly look at you and you are always busy. You do so much. You take on so much. You are so generous with your time. You are so generous with your time and your team. You love growing and developing people. You have such a huge workload. How on earth do you manage it? Because I often am just sitting here and overwhelmed at my own to-do list, and there's a lot more people sitting under you. So is there a trick? I'm hoping for an instant solution.
You know me, Sinead. I'm terrible at work-life balance, but I think that also points to you really love what you're doing and you know you're impacting people's lives and you're making a difference in society. It's so easy to jump on you'll find me watching a podcast on the weekend or watching a webinar or, reading something, by one of the thought leaders that I love, but that's what gives me energy. And if that's what gives you energy, then that's going to make you happy in life. And thankfully I do have loved ones around me who care about me and pull me back when they do see that I am working too long hours. And Ben is also fantastic as a leader and a boss. If he sees you, on Slack late at night or on the weekends, he will kind of ping and say, hey, there's nothing that's going to break or burn if you give yourself a weekend off. So I think as a leader, you need to also be looking out for your people, especially as we have this remote world of work. If you notice them online late, for me, I've got some team members who are interviewing in the UK at the moment. Yes, the time zone after daylight savings is a lot better. However, give them the permission to take advantage of remote work and do something for themselves the next morning if they've been working till 8 at night. Go for a walk, go to the gym, have the morning to yourself, go and have breakfast with someone and just update Slack that you won't be starting till 10 a.m.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. That passion of loving what you do definitely can fuel that energy. But of course, there's always a tipping point. We need the balance. We can't be solely focused on work and on the business side of things. How do you manage that with your team? Say, obviously, you've just mentioned the UK interviews, but I think there's always an element of when there are leaders who love what they do and love putting the hours in, can create an expectation amongst the team of, well, are they the hours we're meant to work, or are we meant to work beyond standard hours? And I think it's a really tricky balance when you are passionate about what you do. And I have super strict boundaries about if I'm working late, I won't message the team or I won't send them messages on Teams, and I won't communicate because I don't expect any response in that time. I'll time my emails so they're sent at different times, and I'll never message people if I'm working on a weekend. But how do you navigate that? Because I often find it a tricky thing.
Yeah, it is really tricky. And I do exactly the same as you. So if I'm slacking someone in my team, I schedule that Slack to go out at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. the next morning so that they're not being bothered as I'm going through my emails. If it's someone external, I do have on the bottom of your auto signature, it's a really great idea to put that you do work flexible hours and there's no expectation to hear a response now. Also, giving your team members permission to pull back on their clients or their workload is really important. So if someone comes to you overwhelmed, or more importantly, if you notice that their camera's off or they haven't joined one of your daily huddles, reaching out to them and asking them if their workload, give them that safety to say, yeah, I am overwhelmed, and help them reprioritize and jump on the tools if you need to. I went in the other weekend and spent a Saturday going through senior candidates because I knew one of my team members was overwhelmed, and she was elated on Monday to wake up and find that the queue was fully taken care of. So sometimes it's really important to muck in and show your team that you can still do what they are doing.
Absolutely. And particularly as things are changing and business is growing and more people join the business, we've gone through a period of growth, and I am further removed from certain teams and certain individuals. But at the same time, when you do kind of lean in and muck in and kind of jump into the finer detail, it says a lot. It signals quite a lot, which I think is important. One thing I did want to naturally, and we touched on it at the beginning, but speak about is the remote working future of work, post-pandemic shift in how we operate. We are, as an agency, collecting so much anecdotal information and data about what candidates want, what employers are doing, where those two things meet and where they diverge. But naturally, one thing that Employment Hero have been really, really good at as a remote first business is embracing the future of work. So maybe speak through, I know this is an area that you are passionate about, and I feel very strongly about it as well. But maybe talk us through where you're at with that whole future of work sort of model and principle.
Yeah, we pivoted super fast. I mean, it must have been 2.5 years ago now, and about a month and a half into working from home, and this was during the harsh lockdowns, I surveyed the team about their well-being. What more could we be doing to helping them? And I threw the question in, who wants to return to traditional work when it comes back? And 92% of our employees said never. So I picked up a Slack call to Ben and said, let's go remote first. And Ben and I figured out what that looked like. We put together remote first principles. We're about to put together a work from anywhere so that our employees can do what you just did in Bali. Obviously putting a time limit on it because there are certain legislations before you have to start paying local tax. But, it's just about trusting your employees. And if you are going to do an Elon Musk and demand that people come back to the office, I understand he runs a factory, very different, but you are going to lose people, absolutely. People have loved getting their life back, being able to manage their calendar, spend more time with their family, and COVID's done the change management for us. So leave it there. Your employees are happier and more productive in a remote world of work. It's just about figuring out, how do you make those social connections happen? You said today that you come into the office for the first time and it's just reminded you of how fabulous your team is and how much fun you have together. So it's making sure you introduce those types of things. So we're doing our first global gathering in Thailand in August. Wow. And that is about 580 people getting together for 5 days. And that's going to be all about social connections. We only have one keynote speech, learning as well as getting together communities that are passionate about whether it's a wine club. We've got a food and wine one for exercise and fitness. There is one for animals. So all of those kind of groups are going to get together as well.
Amazing.
And lots of and rewards. So we've got massages on the beach, for example, and all of that.
I'm hearing this and I'm just wondering how I get my hands on a ticket to this, this employee only event. Your recruiter will show up in Thailand. That sounds incredible. And what an opportunity to get everyone together, particularly as you have gone global. And it is, of course, as you say, that connection piece is absolutely crucial. It is the thing that drives us. It's the reason that we feel an affinity with a business and a culture and a leadership team and an organization. So to be able to create those opportunities for people is amazing. It's such an interesting topic, the remote working and remote first and hybrid. And it's been fascinating to see businesses like yours who have just made strong decisions early on to fully embrace the future of work and the change. And then other businesses who are honestly going in the other direction. We were recruiting for a business who they really wanted people in 5 days a week for certain reasons, rebuilding culture after COVID. And you kind of can understand their point of view, but we got them down to 1 day in the office. But it's been a bloody nightmare. It's been a nightmare to recruit. It's not what people want. It's a professional business. It's not like there is a factory or retail or anything like that requires people to be in the office. And so it's been tricky. And I think with what we're seeing, more and more candidates they're wanting a blend, as you said, the ability to connect, the ability to feel like they're a part of something and a part of a community and a culture, but at the same time, have the ability to work from home. And it often does come down to a trust thing. I think it signifies to individuals that they are not trusted if businesses aren't willing to support remote working, when we know that we've all functioned very well in remote working over the last couple of years. I was listening to a podcast diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. I don't know if you know it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, you'd love it. It's fantastic. He's doing an American series at the moment, and he was interviewing the founder of Strava. And the two of them were talking about how much they wanted people back in the office, and it wasn't a popular decision, but they really wanted people back in. And it's just, as I heard them talk about that, I just thought that this isn't going to be easily solved. There's so many different businesses, so many different individuals with such strong opinions. But one thing that I do know is that it is absolutely going to it is the future. It's absolutely going to stay. We absolutely need to embrace it. It's not going back to the way that it was. And in a very talent short market in Australia, what you have done in being able to find people in different states and different regions and overseas, when you have that sort of flexible mindset, you do get to benefit from it as well. So yeah, it's an interesting topic. And I think a lot of people want a solution and a quick solution, but there isn't one. I think it's, very many different strokes.
Great for employees too. We have some terrific stories of people who have moved to Byron Bay. They've moved 3 hours south to be closer to their aging parents. So people, pinging me on saying, I've just bought a house with 3 bedrooms. I've never thought in my entire life that I would be able to afford that. And really great stories like that. But there are certain things that you do have to get together for. For example, we've got a strategy day tomorrow with our ELT. We are all coming together in Sydney because we just know that a day like that is more effective in person rather than trying to do it remotely.
Completely. And I noticed that with my general manager, when he and I are in a room and we are just smashing through things, it feels more effective than sometimes the Zoom fatigue you can get. And exactly to your point, how amazing that people are having these different experiences that they wouldn't have had if they had to remain in capital cities. And, I went back to Ireland for 3 months last year when the world was in lockdown, the borders were closed. I was lucky enough to be able to get back, and I worked remotely for 3 months, and I was very tired because I was working mental hours, starting at 5 a.m. every day. But you make it happen, and I made it happen. And again, my job before COVID was running around the city, seeing people in person, going for coffees, doing business meetings, and that's all just gone online now. I'd say 98% of our meetings are online now. So even being in Bali for 2 weeks, I know for a fact that not a single thing beyond the connection with the team, not a single meeting or event or anything that cropped up was impacted by the fact that I was far away, other than sometimes a dodgy Wi-Fi signal, but I got over that quickly. Amazing. And what I want to ask you finally is, just around, again, the reason for this podcast is to put a lens on the way we look at work, because I know that so many different people feel differently about work now after the pandemic, because everything you've described, values and change of living circumstances and change of perspective and health scares and everything else. And so people are in that place of making decisions and making big calls. So for anyone who is in a rut or experiencing any sort of kind of questions or anything about what they do next, like what would your advice be if you're not loving what you do in a purpose-filled business? What would you advise someone?
First of all, trust yourself. Reach out to other professionals if you want to change areas and chat to them about their job. However, if your company is purpose-driven and you're happy with the company and the purpose, have that conversation with your manager. Because as employers, we don't want to lose people just if they want to change functions. For example, internal mobility, I'm really, really very passionate about it. And we move people across functions all the time. So don't stay in a role, stay in a company if you're there for the company. But if the company's not right for you, just trust your gut and move on. You can always start again if you need to. If it ends up being the wrong decision, you will end up learning from it, even though it might take you a year to realize it was a learning experience.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I think you touched on something that we see a lot, which is individuals maybe assuming there's no further opportunity for me here, or no, that's a different team. And people leave for that reason. And I actually think that breakdown in communication of people being afraid or shy to kind of put their hand up and ask for more, or ask for a different direction, or ask for a pivot, it often, as you said, most businesses, particularly in this market where it's so hard to find people, will throw the kitchen sink at good people. They will want to keep you. They will want to look after you. They will, brilliant. We were already looking for someone with that in that team. So absolutely come on over. And I think that's definitely a breakdown. And as recruiters, we definitely see that as well. So it's, very good advice. Alex, thank you so much for jumping on with me. As I said, you have inspired me so much over the years. You continue to do so. You've had an amazing career. Thank you. And I know everyone will take so much from that as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been fantastic.